The Canadian media shares responsibility for the lack of adequate diversity in Canadian politics due to its discriminatory representation of racialized groups. For many years, minority politicians have faced oppression based on cultural beliefs and faced challenging barriers when trying to represent a political party in Canada. In a recent report done by CBC, it was discovered that diverse politicians often face higher obstacles of prejudice from the media that other politicians do not have to fear, making it difficult for minorities to gain political power. For example, during the 2019 Canadian federal election, Jasmeet Singh was told by a Caucasian citizen to remove his cultural headwear so one could be a true Canadian. Clearly, the media and the Canadian government failed to acknowledge diversity in the political ideologies. The purpose of this research report is to enshrine light for marginalized leaders and to raise awareness about discrimination in the Canadian political system. After reading the final research report, the audience will have a logical understanding of the discrimination in the current system by utilizing real examples to allow the audience to understand what it means to be racially discriminated against. With this research report, I hope to present a message to all members of Canadian society, along with the leaders who manage political representation. Clearly, the Canadian government and news have perpetuated a society where the elites have the majority say when it comes to political conclusions. I hope to send a message to the Canadian government specifically, with the hopes they will acknowledge the system is flawed and many people have been marginalized based on cultural and political ideologies. Finally, with this research report, I hope the Canadian government will acknowledge the corrupt system and allow minorities to have a voice in terms of political decisions. The intended audience for my research report will be government agencies and the media. The reason being is that the government and media have the ability to control what the greater society views and perceives. The government has the ability to control who represents its members, and I believe speaking directly to the government will enshrine light for marginalized politicians. Another intended audience for my research report will be policymakers. Policymakers have the ability to create laws and enforce social norms that society follows. For example, the federal government passed Bill 21, which prohibits public workers from representing religious symbols in the workplace. Clearly, the government fails to represent the Canadian heritage where individuals are free to practice any religion freely. The research report will utilize examples such as Bill 21 to effectively persuade the attention of the policymakers and the government. Using the examples will demonstrate how the Canadian system clearly fails to acknowledge the multicultural society. In the study, Media and the Coverage of Race in Canadian Politics, the author conducted extensive research on the topic of media and race and found that visible minorities' coverage is often more negative. The article demonstrates the coverage of minorities is more likely to focus on their socioeconomic status, and the media is less likely to portray minorities as interested in current policy issues that are most important. The study provided relevant data and found that 64.4% of front-page stories are about white candidates, compared to 35.6% of visible minorities. The data clearly demonstrates that white candidates are twice as likely to receive courage than minorities, making it extremely difficult for minorities to gain political power. The study concluded that there are reasonable indications that minorities are suppressed in the media and face difficulty obtaining political power through a lack of representation in the media. Contributions and Challenges of Addressing Discursive Racism in the Canadian Media completed extensive research in the correlation between race and the media. The study predicted that local newscasts dominated stories about Caucasians and disregarded the minority society through portraying poverty, unemployment, and crime. The study emphasized that the media is one of the most powerful methods to transmit cultural images, ideas, and symbols because the media has the ability to perpetuate and influence mass groups of individuals. The study utilizes a specific case from the Toronto Sun called Power Without Responsibility, which was an article directed towards minority class citizens. The study undertook an analysis looking at 200 editorial columns and revealed that there was a repetition of stereotypical discrimination towards the minority class. The study finalized that the media has the ability to perpetuate wrongful images to its viewers, making it extremely difficult for the minority class to obtain recognition and political power. The final study examines discrimination in employment within Canada using legal cases from the Canadian Human Rights Report. According to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, one is free of discrimination based on race, color, and ethnicity. But many studies have found that there is still discrimination through uneven job access, unfair selection, and workplace harassment. A study was conducted on white individuals based on the topic of discrimination and found that over 50% of white individuals pose some sort of racist ideology. The study concluded that the government needs to put policies in place to combat racial discrimination in the workplace. Clearly, minorities are suppressed and discrimination in employment is still a problem in the Canadian context. My next steps in my research report are to find contemporary examples of how multicultural politicians are racially discriminated against within the government population. In the next few weeks, I would like to go back to the beginning of my research and develop a better understanding of the roots of my research. This will allow me to fully summarize everything learned from the beginning of the semester. As well, I will be able to touch upon my earlier notes to back up my argument. I would like to narrow my audience down to a more specific crowd because if I speak to specific individuals, I am more likely to convey my message. Finally, I would like to approach my fellow classmates to get their opinion on my final research argument. This will allow me to receive feedback from many different perspectives and will further my knowledge on my specific topic.